Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon Kemp. I'm the Chief Digital Officer of DATAVERSITY. We would like to thank you for joining the very first installment of the new monthly DATAVERSITY webinar series, Leading AI Governance with First San Francisco Partners. Today, Kelly and Lisa will discuss cutting through the noise, what AI governance leaders really need to know. And just a couple of points to get us started. Due to the large number of people that attend these sessions, you will be muted during the webinar. If you'd like to chat with us or with each other, we certainly encourage you to do so. And just to note that the Zoom defaults to send to just the panelists, so you may absolutely change that to network with everyone. For questions, we will be collecting them via the Q&A section. And to find the Q&A and the chat section, you may click on those icons in the bottom middle of your screen to activate those features. And as always, we will send a follow-up email within 2 business days containing links to the slides and links to the recording of the session and any additional information requested throughout the webinar. Now, let me introduce to you our speaker for our brand new series here, Kelly O'Neill. Kelly is the founder and CEO of First San Francisco Partners, a leading data consulting firm. A recognized expert in the data industry and sought-after speaker, Kelly has extensive experience in data governance, master data management, and customer relationship management. She has held senior roles at Golden Gate Software, Siebel Systems, and Oracle, working across the US, Europe, and Asia. Under Kelly's leadership, First San Francisco Partners has grown significantly since founding it in 2007, partnering with large, well-known companies throughout the country. And joining Kelly today is Lisa Wintrick, an executive advisor at First San Francisco Partners. Lisa's specialty is building data capabilities from the ground up with an emphasis on legacy transformation and enabling a data-driven culture. Lisa's expertise in analytics and AI capabilities, as well as data management, position her as a trusted advisor and advocate for data as a strategic asset. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly and Lisa to get our brand new webinar series started. Kelly and Lisa, hello and welcome.
Thank you so much, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our inaugural session of our AI governance webinar. And so in preparation for this webinar, Lisa and I have had a very good time researching AI governance and what it means to the world, actually. And so we came up with a plan for 2026. And we have monthly webinar titles that we are going to review with you. And I really want to note that this is an evolving field. And so as much preparation as we have done in terms of identifying the most important topics and trying to predict what we're going to want to be talking about in, 6 months' time, 8 months, 12 months' time, it's very hard. So I just want to put that out there, is that this is an evolving field and we are learning as we go. And there are so many different perspectives of AI governance right now. Our goal in this is really to cut through the noise and to cut through the clutter. And that's really the first session that we're going to be talking about today. So we hope to see you in all 12 sessions, and just forgive us if we start to evolve this webinar content in this evolving field. We want to make sure we're current and we're not stuck just because we came up with abstracts in advance. Okay. Today we are talking about cutting through the noise. What we want to make sure is at the end of this session that we have a working definition of AI governance. Working because, again, this is evolving and the scope of AI governance is evolving. But let's start with something so that we can actually have a conversation. Let's, understand why this space is so buzzword heavy and why there is some hesitancy around implementing AI governance. So that's something we'll talk about quite a bit. Honestly, we also wanted to start with cutting through the noise and the clutter because of that inaction or that light on action. And then lastly, because I know that this audience is very participatory, we are going to engage you to help define what are your 20 questions at the end. And so we've got some thought starters for you. And then this is going to be kind of hopefully some engagement at the end that help you to share your thoughts as well. Again, we're going to be learning from you as much as, hopefully you're learning from us. So I guess with that, Lisa, like, why clutter? Like, what's happening here? And why are we starting with clutter?
Well, Kelly, that's a really great question. And I think the clutter isn't accidental. It's a byproduct of how fast AI is evolving, and it's outpacing the frameworks and the structures and the traditional ways that we have handled technology in the past. But what really starts to muddy the waters, and we're seeing this a lot with our clients, as you know, is the language barrier. And that words are being used that, frankly, people are defining on the fly, and defining differently. And the success of AI is nebulous, and there's not a common yardstick for success. Therefore, different constituents, different functions within an organization are all looking for different things. So that makes it really hard to get everyone on the same page, to really start to leverage this technology, leverage AI as an innovator for the organization. And what happens when people aren't speaking the same language? Well, those people that are really interested in AI are going to find a way to do it on their own. And that leaves your organization open to, a lot of nefarious things that could happen. And people aren't doing that intentionally, but they're trying to do their job. And so when we think about that, and we think about kind of the common thread that we've heard about governance since the beginning, that it's too difficult, it's a stop sign, it's just not something we want to get involved in. We really are starting to see that, people are putting the brakes a little bit on governance when we believe that they should really be investing in it.
Yeah, most
So, so, so Kelly, how about if we start at the very beginning, removing the clutter by defining what we think what AI governance is today?
Sure. All right. Well, AI governance is really a evolution of other sorts of governance practices in an organization. So really, it is an organizing framework, not a single framework. And we're going to talk about that quite a bit, actually. And it is making sure that you have set up the people, processes, technology, data, and oversight so that your company's representation to the market and the way that AI solutions are developed and enabled and used in the market reflects your company's goals and values. And so it is this combination of things like, visibility, decision rights, controls, and it ensures that AI aligns with the values and the ethical intent of your organization while meeting regulatory expectations. I did want to touch on that a little bit because AI governance, while there is a regulatory component of it, it is not just all about the regulations. The regulations themselves are evolving. The regulations, whether it is in the EU, whether it is in the US, whether it's at the federal level in the US, or the state or even the municipal level in the US, the regulatory landscape right now is very much the lowest common denominator. And so when we want to think about governance as the enabler, we can't be bound just by that lowest common denominator. Or as a community, we will always be playing catch up. And what we want to do is to leverage governance to stay a little bit, ahead of what's happening in the technical world to ensure that we are being proactive. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. But governance is decision-making rights, it's visibility, it's risk tiering, buzzword. Lisa, do you have a definition for risk tiering?
You know what? I do.
Yay.
So risk tiering is really, in the context of AI, it's higher impact use cases that require stricter documentation, testing, human oversight, and monitoring. And it becomes the backbone for deciding what needs review, what needs audits, and what can move faster.
Oh, I love that. You know, the other buzzwords, so we wanted to make sure that we were balancing like the buzzword, you know, bingo concept with the education. Defining AI governance also brings up these terms like responsible AI and explainable AI. Lisa, do you have those definitions handy?
I do. So responsible AI shows up as repeatable practices. So knowing what AI is in use, who owns it, and how it's approved, and how it's monitored once it's live. And as AI systems become more autonomous and adaptive, responsibility shifts from one-time reviews to continuous oversight and escalation paths. Explainable AI means exactly what it sounds like, right? It means auditability. It means tracing inputs, processing, and outputs in a way that support review and accountability. Accountability is another word that I think we're going to be talking a lot about today, because giving clear accountability and responsibility to folks in your organization makes the manifestation of AI goals a whole lot simpler. Kelly, back to you.
Yeah, no, this is great. And the other component that makes AI governance a bit different is the scope and what AI covers. So, for those of you that I have met, usually there's people on these webinars that I've met. For those of you that have met other people at First San Francisco and listened to us speak, we've been working in the data governance field for, as a company, almost 20 years. Data governance and AI governance are different, though. And we do have, I think it's in March, where we talk about data governance and AI governance. One of the differences in AI governance is what it covers and the scope. So it is the software development lifecycle or the process of purchasing AI solutions, in addition to things like, you know, data and people and process and all of that. And so I think one of the nuances that we want to consider is that breadth of scope and the complications around that, which means stakeholders, you know, et cetera. So that is something that also makes AI governance difficult and, of course, like fast moving. Lisa, anything else we want to talk about in terms of level setting and the definition?
I think just what we started with as we evolve this series and as we evolve in our collective knowledge of AI governance, we'll continue to refine this definition and probably start kind of every session with what have we learned and how would we update this or change it to be more current. So that this is something that we together collectively will be a living and breathing definition, and on December 31st we may have an answer.
Maybe. Oh, I love that. I think so. We're going to have to hold each other accountable to starting each session with what we've learned. I love that idea, Lisa. That's so fantastic. All right. Well, of course, we talk about, you know, what it is, but we also have to talk about the why. So, Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about why are we seeing this as a non-negotiable component of AI?
Sure. And I trust, as many of you are AI or data practitioners on the line, you've seen scads of articles that say the same thing. But what we're seeing is that, you know, people that are embracing AI frameworks, AI governance councils, and doing that as a foundational capability, are doing better in this space because they understand how they're going to work together to make this come alive. And I don't think that's any surprise to any of us who have been data governance practitioners for any period of time. And I think it's a great opportunity for those folks that are governing the valuable commodity that makes AI run, which is data, to kind of hitch your wagon to something. One of our internal folks said that, data AI is data's moment. So thinking about that and AI governance and how it plays into and is a part of data governance is something that I think is great. But really, what we're seeing is that, you've got to start, and you've got to start now. And I think that, again, any place that you look in the industry is going to point to that uh, exact same thought, and everyone is putting an urgency to it.
Yeah, for sure. And this, you'll see in our presentation here, we've got articles that we're either citing directly, we've got articles that, or, people that have inspired some of our thoughts here. So one of the things that I thought was interesting about this article from CIO Magazine is the title of the article is "Trust is the New Currency." And so this idea of trust around AI is really, really critical here. And so what that title is also saying is that trust has a quantifiable value just in and of itself. And this is also kind of what these quotes are reinforcing, is that there is a way to translate that trust into things like, efficiency gains, into customer retention, into other things that directly contribute to both revenue and, quite frankly, GDP of an economy. So I thought that was a really interesting way to think about this as, trust as being a real currency. And this idea of trust also then leads to some of these other buzzwords. So I'm going to go back to buzzwords. Anyway, by the end, we'll start dropping, the buzzwords. But now, while we're starting to kind of level set and describe. So one of the buzzwords that personally I had to look up was synthetic content labeling. And I'll go ahead and spare Lisa, I have the definition in front of me here. So synthetic content labeling is the disclosure of AI generated or manipulated content to signal its origin. So it's a way of making AI explainable. So I couldn't kind of the irony to me of the fact that the idea of trust is creating all of these new buzzwords, all of these new requirements, all of these new ways of trying to prove that people are being responsible from an AI perspective. And really, that's what AI governance is all about. Lisa, anything else to add? Do you want to go on?
Well, let's see what happens when you just don't do it.
Oh, I don't know if we want to know that. What happens?
So we like to call it reactive AI governance, and it's costly. So, we have established that AI governance is necessary, and we've also established that it's complicated. The approach that we've unfortunately seen with some of our clients is that they ignore it until disaster strikes. And what happens at that point is there's a scramble to slam a framework, any framework, just give me a framework, into place so that we can prove that this won't happen again. The investment now shifts to recovery and correction versus the actual building of the foundational capability. And people just are taking shortcuts, and this we find is preventable, and a full-blown AI governance program is perhaps aspirational, but taking small steps toward this program in the ways that we will discuss today and in the future are really preventative measures that can help to avoid some of these things. Clarity and accountability, responsibility, and just clear communication could prevent most of the things that we see happen with our clients. And we wanted to call this out not as a scare tactic, but just as a real world fact that avoiding this governance, AI governance instantiation is a recipe for disaster. Kelly, what are you thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, if you're going to be reactive, at least you're going to be reactive. However, thinking about as much as possible beforehand is absolutely kind of where we want to head. And when we think about that, we're thinking about it as this sort of delicate balance between risk and innovation. And so a lot of the regulatory environment looks at risk. So, risk identification, risk mitigation. But then we also want to think about AI governance and governance as an enabler to help drive innovation. Because if innovation is stifled because we're so focused on risk, innovation is going to move into the shadows. We're seeing that a lot in our clients where, AI is everywhere in technology in company right now. And so, AI is both part of applications. So you implement an application and there's AI decision making within that application. A lot of these applications have their own agent frameworks, right? So, you've got a SaaS-based agent model. We can talk about buy versus build. I don't know if we're going to have time to get into that here, but you can build your own agents, you can buy your own agents. So there is such an opportunity for innovation to go into the shadows, and people will start innovating using AI on the side, even if it's not sanctioned by the company. So we want to acknowledge that because, most of us lived through, shadow IT and the BI era and all of that. Lisa, you were in the thick of it during that time. How was that? Is this feeling the same to you?
I think it's the same and more urgent. And the reason I say that is because BI was within our own walls, and it was, a per seat license, and it was something that we had to hand to people, which gave us somewhat of an opportunity to train them. The readily available AI platforms, AI tools, AI applications in the market really kind of bypass all of that. And if we don't have a strong communication about the risks, people are going to inherently take the path of least resistance. And therefore, put our data and our organizations at risk. So yes, it is BI all over again. We will maybe get to the point where we talk about agent proliferation, like we had BI report proliferation, which many of us are still, trying to recover from. But the availability and the ease of use is really creating great innovation, but also, to your point, Kelly, a need for balancing risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, more buzzwords. Modality risk. So we've got modality risk, we've got model risk management, and then another one. So modality risk. Lisa, do you want to take it? You want me to take it?
Oh, well, I have it right at my fingertips.
Look at that.
Modality risk is how AI risk changes across text, image, audio, and video. What does that mean? It means that different modalities introduce discrete and distinct security privacy risks. And multimodal and agentic systems expand the ways that inputs can influence behavior. So what it's not a single risk that can be managed the same way across all systems. And I think that's the point of it, is that, you are now looking at risk across multiple media and multiple types of data or inputs to your AI.
Yeah, fantastic. Do you have the definition for model risk management? This is something that has been talked about a lot, and probably a lot of people on the call actually are doing model risk management, but we wanted to call it out here.
Sure. It's the discipline of approving, controlling, and monitoring models. And really what that means is a clear ownership, approval gates, and periodic revalidation, which is very important, especially as models drift, get retrained, or are updated. And governance expands from model performance to include misuse risk, data risk, and operational risk. And how do we do that? We look at the access, we look at the logs, and we look at incident handling. So it's taking our governance really into the model lifecycle.
Yeah, that's great. And into like broader the innovation lifecycle as well. And so again, back to why AI governance is a bit complicated is because it covers lots of these different components. There's another article in CIO magazine that talked about controlled autonomy versus guarded freedom. And I thought that was a really interesting way, and that kind of inspired this idea of a balance. So controlled autonomy is this idea of kind of, this aspect of controlling that freedom of development and therefore freedom of decision making within the AI as well. And then guarded freedom, which is more appropriate for less regulated industries, but is saying that we're going to provide this democratization, right? How much have we been talking about data democratization and all of that? And yet it's still guarded. So, that saying the same thing, but in different terms, depends on the industry that you're in. And do you want to have it feel more controlled and controlled autonomy versus feel more free and therefore it's guarded freedom? Anyway, again, another way, an interesting way to think about AI governance and what that could mean. Anyway, let's keep going. So wanted to just share some thoughts around like what are different ways to talk about this. So as we go into, what are these sort of considerations? And, if it hasn't come across, we want to just make sure that we're talking about this idea of a rigid framework isn't appropriate in this moment. And because the innovation is occurring so quickly, that the more rigid your framework, the more that framework is going to be left behind as AI and AI capabilities move forward. So what we want to do is talk about what are some considerations that will ensure you have organizational readiness and accountability. So what are some of these things that we want to think about? The first one is really like stakeholder involvement. And this is so great because, AI governance as a capability can orchestrate that cooperation across stakeholders. And stakeholders are within your organization from the board all the way down to the user of AI. And it's stakeholders kind of across, meaning like your vendors, your partners, and your customers. So really understanding the stakeholders' view of what they need from AI and the efficiencies that AI drives, as well as what do they want. So stakeholders is a consideration to determine what does this mean to your organization and how do you want to implement it. Guidelines and transparency. That's, governance is about guidelines. We don't want to minimize the fact that governance is about guidelines and providing some level of oversight and rules and leveraging those guidelines for transparency also. We've talked about aligning objectives and how those objectives and ethics demonstrate the values of your organization through your AI, but also, creating this common language so that when you are actually trying to make a decision about AI, that you are truly talking about the same thing. And I don't think we dive into it kind of um, uh, in this webinar, but this idea of literacy. And literacy is something that's going to be very important. And I know that everybody is thinking about literacy and what it means to be literate in multiple ways: data literacy, AI literacy. Anyway, Lisa, anything that you want to add? Do we want to dive into some of these other categories as well, or anything that you wanted to add to this slide?
I think that the literacy conversation is one that we are, we frame in this space as a common language. And literacy can mean a lot of things to a lot of folks, but creating that common language is really where this program needs to begin. So I think calling that out is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and then how, within all of these considerations, you can understand where flexibility needs to happen to enable the automation, and then also where oversight needs to happen. All right.
And then getting back to that common yardstick to measure success.
Yes.
That if everyone's speaking the same language and everyone's looking for the same value, it makes it a whole lot easier to show the value of what is a really significant investment in some places over time, and really kind of assure your stakeholders, be they the board or the people, the boots on the ground in your organization, that this investment is really making things better for us.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Yes. And it's investment across all different sorts of AI, right? From machine learning and deep learning and foundational models and generative AI, and how generative AI is used not only for creative assistance, but also for coding and automation. And I mean, it's just so much. And so making sure that it is focused on value back to the organization, that's really critical, and how we can measure that. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's look at kind of what are some of these frameworks then.
So, okay, we're going to get into the point where we're ready, right? We have a framework, and it could be one of these 5, 6, 7, 100, right? Everyone has a framework. We've been introduced to our new stakeholders. The board really wasn't around for BI reporting, but they're around for AI, right? So we have a new set of folks we need to talk to, we need to understand. We recently worked with a client that had a BSO instead of a CISO, and we had to look that up, to be honest, to say what's that role. But these emerging roles around security. So we've got our frameworks, we've got our stakeholders, and then we have our very vocal end users. They just want to do the thing. They just want to get their job done. So we have all of these people that are kind of circling around us as AI governance practitioners, and it's chaos. And I mean, I would challenge anyone to say otherwise. When you're working with new stakeholders, you have to understand what's important to them. Your end users, again, how are they going to use these tools to be better, and what's the value proposition? So what we'd like to propose is that moving forward without a plan is progress without clarity. But one of the things that we think we would like to have you consider and begin to really master is putting a wrapper around all of these things in the form of an orchestration layer.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's success by design, right? So creating an orchestration layer that cuts through all of the noise, all of the misinformation, can give a clear value proposition in order to get the budget, in order to allay the stakeholders, is really the most efficient way to start. Because to Kelly's point, without a framework can be very rigid. Stakeholders can be very demanding. and end users know what they need. So in order to pull all of these folks together in a way that creates rapid value, right, is really uh, is really the most effective way to get started. And one other thing that this orchestration layer does is it keeps AI in the middle. It keeps it from becoming too technical or too business driven. I was telling Kelly that I spoke to a former colleague. We had lunch a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about what was happening at his organization, and he came up through the data science ranks. So had years of experience at that organization with machine learning, optimization, simulation, things like that, and came up through the technology organization. And he said the business wants to hire an AI guru, um, which is great, but it also speaks to the fact that the business isn't aware that AI has been happening in that organization for a decade. And that's where the breakdown is. And so using things like this to pull all the voices together really starts to cut through that and makes the best of the investment. So Kelly, if we were going to talk about what an orchestration layer looks like, how would we start?
All right. Well, funny you should ask, Lisa. So, in creating this orchestration layer, we are also acknowledging that it's a level of rigidity, right? So I think what we want to acknowledge is that it's hard to create a framework that doesn't have some sort of rigidity. However, the goal in this orchestration layer is to really focus on decision making and accountability. And rigidity in decision making and accountability shows up as making sure that the right people are at the table. And I think that that's okay from a rigidity perspective. It means that we are ensuring that there is acknowledgement from a most senior level in an organization and input from a variety of different stakeholders. So some of y'all might recognize this format. Of course, as we talked about earlier, it's reusing other governance frameworks and other decision-making frameworks and pulling together executive decision-making at the top level, incorporating that with ethics is very important as a key input point. Coming from a data governance background, we did have involvement from things like privacy organizations and that sort of thing. But ethics, they were involved sometimes when it got really sticky, but now ethics is involved regularly. And that is a key difference. Pulling together, data analytics and AI leadership, which should include the business, by the way. So you might have a chief data officer, you might have a chief analytics officer, you might even have a chief AI officer, or you might have someone who is in charge of digital, which is everything. So that leadership committee needs to be involved and also take some guidance from their key users and their key constituent base. And then filtering the demand and filtering the guidance down through more and more sort of tactical groups of people doing work. So whether you consider those different types of, committees, or whether it's people that are actually, coming together on a formal or informal basis to get work done in a cross-functional category-specific working group. And this idea that the communication does need to go up and down, that the communication is both in terms of requirements and constraints. And then, of course, incorporating things like the progress and impact metrics. So a couple of slides ago, maybe 3 slides ago, Lisa talked about monitoring and measuring and the importance to make sure that we can point to value that's driven into the organization. Literacy, change management, consistent communication to drive transparency, and then the idea of providing it like services. So anyway, this is a framework that provides a decision-making and accountability orchestration layer that will facilitate orchestration across data technology and other components of AI. Lisa, comments, thoughts?
I think that the up and down communication and value going both ways is really key here. But also that we're giving space for everyone to have their voice heard.
Yeah.
So, when you think about cross-functional category-specific working groups, and I saw something in the chat about the word committee, and I understand. These are very sensitive words in a lot of organizations, but if you think about what those cross-functional category-specific working groups are, they're your product teams. They're your AI development teams. They are all of those groups that want a voice and want their voice heard in the prioritization of this work. And what I also think is really an important call out in this framework is that everything kind of converges in the middle. So for those of us that have been governance practitioners, all of the work that you do on the data management side of the house is in service of the analytics community, which might be a better word than committee, and the AI stewardship committee, right? So if your priorities are going straight up and not converging in the middle, then there's a disconnect. And again, that leads to a disconnect in the value proposition. So pulling everyone together in the center to make sure that the organization is collectively moving in the same direction is what makes this orchestration layer useful, because everyone knows what their role is and everyone knows what they're accountable for and the value that it's going to bring.
Yeah, absolutely. And another point about this idea of an orchestration layer is one of the challenges around AI governance is that the decision making around AI doesn't nicely fit into existing committees. Like, when we're rolling out data governance, sometimes we're like, okay, how can we fit the data governance decisions into existing committees? Again, love it or hate the word, but existing decision making structures, because nobody wants another meeting. Well, you know what? This doesn't fall into the risk committee anymore. It doesn't fall under the audit committee. It doesn't always fall under ethics either. It doesn't fall under the strategy committee. So this might be a moment in which this orchestration layer is pulling together a new group of people to talk about this that isn't bound by existing committee or decision-making structures within an organization. All right, let's keep going, and then we'll take questions at the end, if that's okay. So I see that the Q&A is starting to get populated, and the chat is just too busy for me to focus on. So thank you, Lisa, for taking a look. All right. Okay, so, we don't want to deny the fact that this is also an implementation process. So Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about how the idea of governance and decision-making shows up through implementation?
Sure. And this is a nod to the technologists in the room, right? Governance is orchestrating the people in the process, but it also plays a really strong role in the life cycle of an AI value proposition. So thinking through how governance can help with each of these steps is really another way that you can connect the technology to the people and process. So setting direction, collecting requirements. And when we say requirements, really the stewards are telling the story in the business's terms, right? So they can share that value proposition back and forth. Ensuring that everything is designed with the future in mind. Testing, right? You've got your subject matter experts at hand. They can tell you what good looks like. And then again, we talked about model management. That's something that governance can easily slide into and provide value. Prompt engineering, that's a new one, right? Kelly and I have had some really great conversations about how to write a prompt.
I'm terrible at it. Terrible at prompting.
She's getting better, everyone. she's getting better. Because she's working on it. But what are the right questions to ask, and how do you ask the question? That matters. And for those of you like myself that have been coders, you know that the order of operations is critical, right? So prompt engineering is another place where you can have that collaboration as you build your tools. And literacy takes many forms, and as the word committee kind of rubs people the wrong way, literacy sometimes does as well. But it's really finding that common vernacular, and giving people the opportunity to learn what they need to know to use these tools to optimize their own role and their own place in the organization. Risk management we've discussed, but that nuance of bringing people to the table that perhaps weren't interested before, but are now desperately interested in what's happening and what kind of questions they are going to be bringing to the table that we need to consider. So all of these steps in the life cycle, if you will, are great places where governance can help, can support, and can give the technology team, frankly, a voice. Getting back to the orchestration layer diagram that they may not have had before. So it's very helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And I realized in the Q&A, there was a question in the very beginning around sending out the slides afterwards. Absolutely, we will. And those slides, which, some of these busier slides you can read on your own. We also have some definitional slides and glossary and things like that. Anyway, so now as we're kind of coming closer to the end of this, I wanted to, focus some of the attention to kind of where the investment is happening. And Lisa, you shared an article with me that I thought was really, really interesting. And I wanted you to kind of share this with the rest of the audience and why this spoke to you, and definitely, spoke to me as well.
Yeah, I mean, and this was a tech trend analysis that McKinsey just released. And even though it's technology facing, what really struck me immediately was that AI spend is off the charts, right? Especially the agentic AI, which is the new frontier, which we will be talking about, I'm sure, in future sessions. But that digital trust and cybersecurity, the spend is decreasing. And, my own correlation is that, and McKinsey confirmed it by their definition of digital trust, is that we're not investing in our data or the way that we are securing it nearly as much as we are investing in the results of that. Therefore, you will also see, I think, in the market that there's a significant amount of AI that fails. And to me, reading this article, there was a direct correlation between the amount we're spending on data or not spending on data and the capabilities around data and trust and what people are pouring their money into from an AI perspective.
100%. And this is really the statistics show it's kind of a cautionary tale, honestly. And if there's not the investment in the data, as the investment in artificial intelligence grows in all of its forms, it's going to be a very surprising and scary result. So I guess kind of that comes to, one of the things that we want to have people leave with is when you're thinking about your investment in 2026, that it is this, reinforcement that building and investing in strong data and AI foundations will help to ensure sustainability, reliability, trust in your AI infrastructure, your AI solutions, and your relationship with your stakeholders, be it employees, be it customers, be it vendors. And so really thinking about ensuring that the investment from a data perspective is balanced with the AI perspective, for sure. So, Lisa, I might have just taken your thunder in talking about the slide. So please.
Nope, you got it. I think we need to bring it home here, so maybe we can get to the questions.
All right, well, let's get it going. So we have one last little kind of construct to just, help you in terms of the way that you're thinking about this as a way to wrap this up. So change is constant. Change is very fast in AI. It is an opportunity to bring people together and to really leverage the diverse requirements, the diverse viewpoints in AI. And AI particularly needs the highly analytical with the highly creative, which is one reason that it's so, inspiring. Intentionality is very, very important so that you're not just reactive, and embrace this idea of incremental growth, which also means incremental decision making. And once you have embraced this idea of incrementality, that's a big word, it enables you to extend your capabilities and extend your focus easily and over time. So one of the things that was really interesting to us, again, when we were planning for this and doing our research, is this idea of questioning. And at the end of the day, AI governance is about asking the right questions. And we want to make sure that people are thinking about what are those questions that they need to be asking at the right level to ensure that they are protecting their organization, that they are protecting their stakeholders, and that they are enabling innovation. So they're on this balance between the risk and innovation. So some of these are tactical questions, like how will this model behave as it scales? Some of these are bigger picture questions. What is consent? How do you know this is going to work? And we need to be asking not just about, what do we want to see, but what does failure look like? Because if we don't think about the misuse of AI, we just think about a use case, then we're all going to fail. So I know that this isn't 20 questions, but this is an opportunity for you all to start thinking about what is in your 20 questions. And so, Lisa, I know you've been monitoring the chat a little bit. So I would encourage you to put your 20 questions in there. What decisions are you delegating to AI is a good one. How are you thinking about your employees' future as AI augmented practices become more prevalent in your company? Lisa, what are you seeing in the chat?
Oh, I just saw, I'm looking at the Q&A portion. I'm trying to balance between both. And someone just put some really great questions. Agency question, visibility question, durability 6 questions. How do we govern decisions made by AI, not just data provided to AI?
Right.
How are we governing shadow AI without stifling the innovation layer? And we've talked a little bit about that. Is our governance framework regulation agnostic or compliance dependent? Is our governance stopping the inference debt spiral? Have we credentialed our AI agents as non-human employees? That's a really interesting thing that I think we're going to talk about later. But yes, non-human employees is certainly one of the things that people are talking about recently. And are we protecting our models from data incest? So I think those are all great, great questions. Let me flip over to the chat here. And what we'll try to do, I don't know, Shannon, I might be promising something that can't happen, but if people are adding to the chat, maybe we can collect some of those things and update this last slide to include some of the other questions that people asked or added.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. That's great.
And so, let me just, Kelly, see if there's some things in here that we can quickly get through in the chat. Lots of lively talk around committee and council, task force.
Mm.
Yeah, and that is definitely a culture thing. I will share that, I spent 28 years at the same company building AI and data solutions, and um, I've now been at First San Francisco. I retired from there, and I've been at First San Francisco now for 2 years. And the cultural nuance is something that is real. Every organization really talks about things differently, and it's become very apparent to me in the last few years. Let's see.
I wanted to hit a couple of the Q&A, Lisa. Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead.
So the very first one that came in from Pam, thank you. And I'm hoping that you kind of got the answer throughout the presentation, is that using principles instead of specific frameworks. Yes. So when we think about, decision making, that orchestration layer, that's highly driven by principles versus, rigid frameworks. There's ISO, there's NIST, there's this, there's that. And of course, all of those are important and you are using them already. And so taking those frameworks kind of up a level to sort of principles is really a great way to do it, and making sure that you've got agreement through your decision-making structures on principles. And then, oh my gosh, ethics versus compliance. So that is such a good conversation. And I can't remember off the top of my head if we've got a specific one talking about ethics versus compliance. But this is hearkening back to one of our consultants, a figure in the DAMA industry for decades, is Deborah Henderson. And she did a lot of work around ethics versus compliance. And ethics are those things that you want to do because it actually adheres to your personal brand and the way that you think about yourself from a morality perspective. And compliance are those things that you have to do because you've got a regulatory thing, hanging over your head. And I think that is a really real conversation. And the difference between ethics versus compliance, both need to be involved. I don't think it's one or the other. And then, yes, we will talk a lot about data governance versus AI governance in March. Okay, anything else that we, oh, the elephant in the room. Is there no consequence for AI when it goes wrong? But the consequences to the company. And this is why we're really trying to get people to think about those consequences in advance. What does failure look like? Are you prepared for the consequence? Have you talked about it? That's really, an important thing. What did we miss, Lisa? If not, it's time to go back to Shannon.
I think we can safely kick it back to Shannon.
Awesome.
Well, thank you both for kicking off our brand new series, AI Governance. This is just so amazing. It's been a great way to start the new year. Thanks to all of our attendees who have been with us and so engaged in everything that we do. We hope to see you next month. And you can meet Kelly in person at the upcoming DATAVERSITY Conference, Data Governance and Information Quality, happening in May. So everybody, yes. Thank you so much. And just a reminder, I will send a follow-up email by end of day Thursday with links to the slides, links to the recording, and anything else requested. And Lisa, I will get you, that's not an impossible task, we'll get you the chat already on it so that we can add those additional things to the follow-up email.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, well, thank you all. I hope you have a great day. Happy New Year, and here's to 2026.
Yes, Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.